I'm not a speaker. I'm just a person with a story like everybody else. So be very informal and very casual. And if you have any comments or questions at the end, or even in the middle of it, put your hand up, and I'll be happy to, well, I don't probably give my perspective on whatever you might say. So today, being June 4th, it's when Stephanie told me that this would be the day that she'd like me to come, it happens to be what would have been Robert's and my 42nd wedding anniversary today, June 4th, 1971. So it is highly appropriate, I think. I remember him every day and celebrate him every day, but it is fitting today, just the way the universe unfolds sometimes. One of the things that Robert was extremely proud of was that we had fulfilled our wedding vows till death do us part, which is not the norm today in very many cases. And he had a wicked sense of humor. He says, it's too bad I had to die to do that, but I'm really happy that that it was death that parted us and not something else. So he wanted me to be continually proud of that fact, so I am. And before I get too far into this, I just want to say that this is how the story of how pancreatic cancer impacted our family and how we reacted and how we dealt with it. Everybody's story is different. Every set of circumstances is different. Financial, emotional, what stage the disease is at, how long the person lives, you know, whether you have jobs and other family obligations to attend to and that kind of thing. So in no way do I ever want anybody to think that this is sort of what I think is the ultimate way. It was the way the universe unfolded for us and the way that we tried to control how some parts of that universe unfolded for us. But I recognize that every single person has their own story, their own strengths, their own weaknesses, things that are out of their control, etc. So please don't think I'm standing here saying, if you're not doing what we did, you're not doing it right. That's not my intention. So I thought I would introduce Robert to you. That's nice. Okay. And this is our family. But Robert and my daughter Ainsley, who was 27 at the time, and my daughter Sarah, who was 35 at the time. So they were grown women when Robert was diagnosed. So just to set a little background. And to introduce you to Robert a bit, he was 63 when he died. He was an incredible family man. His family came first beyond anything else in his life. His dedicated husband, a wonderful dad. He was a great businessman. He owned East Coast Specialty Hardwoods. He founded that company. Wood was his passion. He loved every day when he went to work. He always said, like the old cliche, if you love what you do, it's not work, and it wasn't for him. He was a very generous person. He was a very kind person. He was very long-winded, some of which he's passed on to me. Stories went on forever. It was wickedly funny. Just a very, very nice, kind, gentle person. But he had an incredibly bad temper, which he would admit to every day of his life and every time he lost his temper. So when pancreatic loomed ahead of us, I was fearful for what was going to be coming down the road. I don't know his dad died when his dad was 57 of cancer, not pancreatic cancer. And when Robert turned 50, I noticed this distinct difference in him. I don't think he was wishing that he would die, and I don't think that was in his psyche every day, but I think he thought, my dad died early, that might be happening for me too, and he made, you know, some sort of changes in his life. He said he was never going to ask people to do things more than once, and he didn't. That included me. And mostly our kids, like if you didn't do it the first time, it's too late. Bombs were going to fall. And he made it a real concerted effort to fill his life more and more and more with the things that were important to him. So when we had the diagnosis of pancreatic cancer on February 24th, 2010, I don't know, I had the sense that he thought, you know, somehow in the back of my mind I figured there was going to be something that would take me earlier than I would want. He never expressed that to me, and all of you who have lived through and are living through, when you hear that for the first time, it's a piece of news that's stunning. I mean, how do you deal with it? How do you take it in? How do you assimilate it? How do you understand it? How do you figure out what the repercussions are going to be? I mean, it is just mind-altering. And when we went in to see the surgeon, in 3 minutes, we were told, I'm so glad to meet you. So sorry to tell you that you have pancreatic cancer and you will be dead within a year. We had traveled to this appointment separately, Robert from the office, me from our house. And you're just like, oh my God. You know. So we left and we walked down, not a word, out, and we just sort of, and I remember saying to Robert, I don't know what to say. You know, I mean, you're in shock. So we went to our separate cars, and I, of course, immediately cried uncontrollably. And then I called our daughters. They'd cried uncontrollably. And I had a half-hour drive home to get to St. Margaret's Bay. And I knew Robert would be there before me, because I had spent all this time crying and talking to the girls. And I thought, you know, what am I going to say when I go in the house? What are you going to do, you know? And I walked in, and Robert was there saying, I've put the fire on, I've opened a bottle of wine, you know, let's just have something casual for supper and watch a movie. And I'm like, did this man not hear what was said to him, you know? But we gradually got around to the subject, and I have to say, I don't know what it is or what it was, but an absolute sense of calm came over Robert. I thought, having a wicked temper, that this man would rant and rail and scream and shout and maybe even throw things. None of that. Just, this is what it is. Shocking, didn't expect it, don't like it, but this is what we're dealing with, Debbie, and we got to figure this out. You know, and I still today don't know how I made that transition in my mind, but I thought, if this is the way he's going to handle it, then this is what I have to do, you know? If he's not going to rant and rave, I'm not going to rant and rave. If he's going to be calm about this, I'm going to be calm about this, you know? I said, I think the last time I was here, that the key, I think, to Robert's and my family's position on this was what I called Robert's AA program, his acceptance and attitude. So when I say he accepted it, I don't mean that he said, okay, I got pancreatic cancer, I'm going to die, and I'm just going to roll over, you know, like a now with my legs in the air and wait for death. He fought for as much life as he could. He put as much into the life that he had left that you could ever imagine any single human being doing. But he knew in the back of his mind that when a surgeon of the esteem that his doctor was tells you this, that, you know, there's probably not much you can do to change the outcome. So accepting it, and I think if I had a general piece of advice, it would be that somehow in your heart and in your mind, you come to accept it. It doesn't mean you like it. It doesn't mean you're not going to fight for every ounce of life that you can get. But if you accept it, then it allows you to exercise some control about how you're going to live with it. And that's what Robert wanted to do. In the subsequent conversations, he said, you know, I can't change probably what's going to happen to me. I'm going to die. But I can sure as hell be in control of some things. And I can call the shots on some things. And I'm going to decide how I'm going to live until the day I die. And I'm going to control what I do in those days, whatever, depending on whatever health-related events came along. And I think that was really key for him and key for our family. And I think our daughters, they were young women. I know they weren't children anymore. But I'm enormously proud of the way they, too, accepted it. Again, not liking it, just horribly upset that this was happening to us and to Robert, and we were going to lose our dad and our husband and the key person in our family. But there is some calming in accepting it and knowing that it's like saying Christmas is going to come. Nothing's going to stop it. And so why get in a panic about it and get all upset and disturbed and distressed about it? You just kind of plan carefully for it bit by bit and, you know, embrace it with expectation and love and that kind of thing. And I think that was the key to Robert. And the other was his attitude. His attitude was, there is no point in getting mad about this like I have about so many other things in my life. Like why the rhododendron died, you know. So he decided, and we had many conversations about this, that he wanted to fill whatever time he had left. He hoped it was going to be a year. It ended up being 10 months. With as much love and joy and fun and everything else that you can think of, as much was possible for him. And that's the way he viewed it. So he said, so we ended up in the point of having surgery, and we thought perhaps that would buy him some time. When surgeons got inside, the positioning of the tumor had become involved with the portal vein, and they couldn't go further. So they did some tweaking inside and reworked his bile ducts so he wouldn't be jaundiced as much and that kind of thing, and sent him home. Well, I wasn't expecting him home for about a week or 10 days or 2 weeks because I thought he was going to have the Whipple surgery. So I was in a panic. But he said to me before he went under the anesthetic, he said, no matter what, I want to know the truth. I don't want anybody to whitewash anything. I don't want to wallow in false hope. I had to go and tell him in the recovery room. I said, surgery wasn't successful. Your life is not going to be extended. And he looked right at me and he said, that's okay. He said, I have the gift of time. And I thought that was so incredibly profound. I thought, my God, I'd never have enough guts in my own body and in my own mind to say that. But so when he was in the hospital, because he wasn't as sick as people who have had the Whipple surgery, and he was in a room with 3 other people, and he didn't like the comings and goings. He started to exercise his control by taking his IV and walking across the hall to the lounge and saying to the nurses, that's where you can find me. I'll have my meals in there. And although he didn't eat for 2 days, until they got him back on food and stuff. And please send all my visitors over, and I'll be back to sleep at night. Nobody questioned this. Nobody said, oh, you can't do that, Mr. Matheson, or we'd rather you stay in bed or something, you know. And if they would say, you need your rest, he said, look, I'm dying. I can rest after I'm dead. Not going to rest now, you know, get off my case sort of thing. So people came and went, and he chatted to everybody in the room. He helped them with their puzzles, and, you know, it was amazing. So then he was going to be sent home early, and I thought, oh, my God, I'm not ready. I don't have any stuff ready at home, and our deck had just been finished planking over, so immediately, and it was a beautiful spring, unlike the one we just had. It was like today, every day, and I went out and bought patio furniture and put it on the deck so he could recover out there, and, you know, I just made all kinds of other plans and things and stuff, and he came home. And it's like, what do you say when somebody comes home after unsuccessful surgery? You know, what? I mean, do you cry? Do you just, what do you do? And he made it so easy. I remember him coming in the house, and the rhododendrons, it was April 9th, and some of the early rhododendrons were just starting. Our passion was collecting rhododendrons. We have over 200 on our property, and they were just starting to come out and bloom, and things were coming up in the garden, and the ice had been out of the cove in front of us, and the wharf was put in, and, you know, and he commented on all those things. And isn't it great to be home? I hated that bloody hospital, and it's so wonderful to be here. And, you know, it was like, does he not realize what, you know, what's transpired or what happened? We had lots and lots and lots of chats about his dying and what was going to happen and his death and all that kind of thing. And lots of tears. I don't want to say we avoided the subject, but on a daily routine, he had decided that he was going to celebrate the joy of life for as long as it lasted, rather than spending it in fear and trepidation of what was to come. And I'm sure he experienced that fear in his heart every day, and I sure experienced it in mine. But I thought, this is the way he wants to play this. This is what I'm going to do, and our daughters were the same thing. So shortly after he came home, we were watching TV, and a movie came on. It was called The Bucket List. I was like, oh my God. And you're just sitting there. It's like one of those moments, like, do I dare get up? Do I dare go and take the toy and switch the channel? Do I say, oh, Robert, we can't watch this tonight? I mean, I just didn't know. It was just one of those horrible moments. It's so embarrassing and so, you know, untimely. And anyway, he said, no, we're going to watch this. Might learn something. And so we watched this movie. We howled with laughter, you know, and I thought, okay, you know, this guy has got a lot of spunk. I was, as you can tell, very impressed with him. So I guess the next thing I would say in helping to conquer how you're going to handle this and how you're going to get through it is to have another A, and that's agenda, and that's purpose. So Robert's purpose, after the Bucket List movie, he said, I'm not going to call it the Bucket List, I'm going to call it my farewell tour. And there are things I want to do, and people I want to see, and places I want to go, and it starts today. And so he had an agenda. And my agenda was to make sure that he was healthy enough and mobile enough to do all the things that he wanted to do. So when you have a mission and you have a purpose, even though inside every day you think, oh my God, it's one last day before he dies, you know, your agenda is to make sure that that day he had become a secondary diabetic due to the tumor, and totally unfamiliar to all of us, and all the insulin rigmarole and all the stuff that goes on with that, and the blood testing and everything. And just trying to keep him on track with that when he didn't want to pay any attention to that kind of thing was a real chore. And sending him with snacks, because he went to work every day, and he started playing golf every day, and we walked every day, and you know, we visited with friends, and we did all kinds of things every day. And so, you know, my purpose was to make sure, or I made it my purpose, to make sure that everything went well, as well as possible for him, so he could do everything. And so I got through it because that was my purpose. And I was fortunate enough that I wasn't working. All our parents were dead. I didn't have anybody else to look after. Our girls were out of the house, although they came back and stayed quite a bit with us through all of this. But, you know, I wasn't looking after them, that kind of thing. I was free to give myself to him. I also, I did and do a lot of volunteer work, and a lot of that is committee work. And at the time I was sitting on the Research Ethics Board of the Dalhousie Health Sciences Research Ethics Board. And there was a tremendous amount of reading with that. And there were meetings, and I was sitting on a number of research committees at the IWK. I'm a lay person, a community person, not a professional person. And I had other things. And I kept those up, because when Robert was at the office, I did that. All the reading and things, it was kind of like my mind took a holiday. It went from here to, how am I going to cope without Robert, and what's life going to be like without him, and I can't believe he's going to die, to, is this ethical, and what does this form have to look like in order to pass, you know, ethics review kind of thing. It was a mental holiday for me, and I think that is a really good thing. If you have anything, if you play bridge, if you read things, if you have volunteer work or something, you need a distraction, because, you know, on the airplane they say put your mask on first before you help anybody else. If you don't keep yourself in mental and emotional ready-to-go state, then it's pretty hard to be there for the person that you're giving care to, or at least in my experience. So I kept up those kinds of things. I had to cancel some things, but I think one of the other things that kept Robert, that he did, which gave him a purpose. Well, his purpose was to have as much fun as he possibly could before he died. And his second purpose was to make sure he left a house in good order. So if you're planning to go away for a year, or you're going away on a 3-month trip or something, there are a lot of things you have to do. And he did all those things. We spent a fair amount of time at an accountant's office going over what all we were going to do with the business. My older daughter had been working there, so we had to decide whether we were going to sell it or whatnot, but she decided she would take it over, and we decided that would be a good thing. So we had a lot of paperwork to rearrange, and our younger daughter was saying, oh, I don't want to be here. I just want Dad. I don't want him to die. I don't want to talk about money, and I don't want to talk about this. And I would say to her, but this is important to Dad, because it's important to him that he leave order behind, that he leave a path for us to follow, that he leave us safe and secure. And so participating in this will give Dad the comfort that he needs to know, to say, okay, they've been paying attention, they know, they buy into the plan, they know what we're going to do, and everything will be okay. So he had that purpose. For months afterwards, a chap who did work for us around the house when we needed it done, who used to work for Robert, came in the spring and he said, Debbie, I'm here to replace your roof. And I said, you are? He said, yeah, it really needed replacing last year, but Bob said he didn't want people working on the property when he was sick like that and whatnot. And he said, replace it when I'm gone and give Debbie something to think about. The chap who delivers the wood for our fireplaces arrived, and he said, hi. Bob contacted me a number of times, and he said, I want you to look after Debbie. I want you to tell me that every spring you'll come and you'll put more wood in the shed and you'll pile it for her. I don't want her piling wood, et cetera, although it would be very good for me. He's come every year since then. He was there last week. And he said, I made a promise to Bob. I'm going to be here every year. If you need wood or you don't need wood. I mean, he thought about all those things. And for him, I don't want to say it was his distraction, but it gave him a purpose that he would know when he was gone that the law and the order that he created would continue. So, it's humorous in a way. So, and I guess another point that I would say would be family advocacy. Someone here tonight, I think you said you would be the person who would be working best with the healthcare system. Well, I wasn't a professional in the healthcare system, but I'd been an adjunct to it as a community person for 35 years. And so when we needed something for Robert, I would spend a lot of time finding out how I needed to source that, or who I needed to talk to. And when he came to his chemotherapy, which was a palliative chemotherapy, I would say, let's schedule it. He would have 3 bad days, the day of the chemotherapy and 2 days after that. But he loved to play golf, and I'd say, can we schedule it so that, he has the chemotherapy on a Thursday or a Friday, give him the weekend at home with the girls and, whatnot, and then he's free for the next however many days to, not be encumbered by it. And, you can't expect someone to... Is that for me? Oh, bless you. Thank you. You can't expect the healthcare system to revolve around one person, but you'd be surprised when you're dying how accommodating they will be. Thank you so much. And they were. So anytime I had the opportunity, when he had an ERCP and a shunt put in for his bile duct, when that stopped working, when the tumor grew and that stopped working, I knocked on doors and I said, we need to do something here. And, the palliative care people sort of said, well, there's not this much and there's not that and everything. I said, no, there's got to be something that can be done. And sure enough, they went in and some fantastic radiologist put a hole in here and put a bypass in and a bag that hung outside. And, he was good to go again. So you just kind of don't give up. And, here I am saying, accept what's happening. But on the other hand, if there's something that you can do to advocate to make things better, then I think that's a really important role. And it gives you, again, these small victories. You're not going to have the ultimate victory, but you know, if you can win the small ones, or you feel like you win the small ones, and you can be very purposeful and very useful, that was tremendously helpful to our family and to us. I think another secret was, for us, we were so open with everyone. And I know it's the nature of some people to kind of cocoon and hide away and close the door, and you don't want to see people. And if that works for you, that works for you. But Robert didn't want people to be gossiping and saying, "What do you think? What's his prognosis? Is he going to die? Is it this or that?" So when people came, he would give them a 5-minute update of what was going on and where he was, and there's no change to the death date yet. I'll let you know if there is, but so far it's on schedule. And then we would proceed to talk and have fun and play games and, you know, go out in the boat or do whatever. I mean, it was as if there was nothing wrong, you know. And he took the opportunity with me, with our girls, to have moving, meaningful conversations, to discuss every fear, every thought, every regret, everything you wanted to express joy in. We took all the time to do that, so we didn't have any regrets. We didn't postpone any conversations because we felt they might be awkward, because Robert wasn't awkward about anything. You could say anything or ask him anything, and he'd tell you. And he wanted it that way. He took our girls each separately on their birthdays, and he took Ainsley in August and Sarah. He was worried he might not make it till November, so he took Sarah in September. And he bought them a pair of earrings, their choosing. And he said, "I know I'm going to be in your heart forever. And I would like to think that somehow spiritually I'll always be there for you, but you know, you don't really know. But on days when you're celebrating something without me, or you're missing me terribly, or you have a conflict in your life, you have a challenging day, put these on and I'll be with you. I'll be right there." I thought that was an incredible thing for someone to do. And you know, it was a hard day for our girls, but it was such a joyous day. And they wear those earrings now. And I know when I see them in that they want their dad clothes, or you know, something's going on and they feel the need to have them. I was so impressed that he did that. Sorry to keep referring to this, but I don't leave anything out. Oh, the other thing is organization. I have this little book, and I'm sure you all know this, so I'm not telling you something you don't know. But every time we went to any appointment, whether it was blood work, chemotherapy, meeting with specialists, surgeons, doctors, palliative care, anything like that, I took this. And if we had any questions, at any time, I wrote them down. So we always had them. I wrote every single solitary thing down from every appointment, because it is true, as much as we don't like to admit it, we hear what we want. We don't necessarily hear what was said. And Robert and I, it became a game. Here's the written text. What did you think he said? Okay, here's what I thought he said. Written text, not exactly what either one of us had heard. And it's there, so you know, and you can refer to it. When he was home, before he died, and I'll get to that point at some point, we kept a journal and a ledger, wrote absolutely everything down. So the three of us, my 2 daughters and ourselves, were on duty 24 hours a day. You just had to read. We didn't have to waste time having the conversation. We could have it, or if you were in the middle of the night with Robert and you wanted to look back, it was all there. It takes a bit of time, but it's a really good thing to do. And in the writing and in the organizing of it, somehow it helps with the reality of the situation, absorbing what's going on, realizing what's going on, and just internalizing it without panic. It was a great tool, and I'm sure many of you already do that. I'm not probably telling people something they don't already know. I think humor was a huge key for our family. Robert had an incredible sense of humor, so that wasn't hard. He would frequently talk to me about his obituary. And he would say, I don't want you to say I died after a battle with pancreatic cancer. I'm not battling this disease. You know, I'm going to die of pancreatic cancer, but it's on my terms and the way I want it. And to some degree, I'm going to try to control when I die. And so you're not to put that in the obituary. Okay, tick. I don't want you to go on and on and on about my attributes and my successes and everything. I think that's so fake. At the end of your life, and I'm at the end of my life, and I know what's important is the relationships that you have and the love that you have, and I know that's cliche, I know that's what everybody says, but it's true. I'm here to tell you it's true. I'm dying, and that's the way I feel. So I don't want you to put that in my obituary. Check. So then he'd go on and say other things, and so one day I took a pen and paper and I put it down. I said, Robert, I think you should write your obituary. and he said, no, you'll do a great job. I said, no, I'll never remember all these things. No, you're writing them all down, Debbie. I know, I see you write them down. And I said, yeah, but you've got so much to comment on it, you know? There'll be nothing left for me to add of my own. So this was a constant. And it was, you know, and when it came time to write his obituary, we sat down, we thought, oh, well, we know we're not going to say this, we're not going to say this, we're not going to do that, we're not going to do that. It was, instead of being, when I wrote my mother's obituary, I cried through the whole thing, it was traumatic, it took me 2 days. We wrote Robert's obituary in about 45 minutes, and we laughed all the way through it, because we kept remembering, oh, can't say that, no, Dad said no, can't do that, no, Dad said we can't do that. Well, I mean, it's going to be the shortest obituary in history. Well, it ended up not being that way, but, you know, it was funny. He was he was home at Christmas just before he died, and he came home with oxygen, and he didn't need it all the time. But when he wanted to say, "I think I'll have a little O," and I said, "Well, this is not a bar, Robert. You know, it's not like the O bars. He'd heard that on the TV or something. I think I'll have a little O." So he was having a little O one day in our living room, with the Christmas tree up, and 3 of his friends were there, and they'd brought him a cigar. And, of course, he had the oxygen going, and, you know, Robert totally oblivious to anything. I mean, all the warnings and everything had been given to the family. You know, we were going to take care of that. He didn't have to think about anything. And he lit his lighter, and the oxygen, it was just right here. And Ainsley thought she pulled the oxygen out. Sarah ran all the way around into the family room. She turned off the oxygen, and it was just like a Chevy Chase movie. I'm not kidding. It was absolutely, when the 3 people were sitting there like, what the hell's just happened, and what's going on? And, you know, Robert just continued to talk. He didn't lose a beat, and, you know, he was saying, Dad, you nearly blew us up. No, I didn't. No, Ainsley, you pulled it out. And Sarah, you went and turned it off. You know, everything's under control. Now, the house could have gone up. We all could have gone. It was just, you know, but afterwards, we just laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed about it, because it was literally so funny, you know. And if you can find humor in any of this stuff, the VON came every day for the last 2 weeks of his life. And they checked in with us, and they did his personal care. He wanted them to shave him and wash him and all that kind of stuff. And so one day he was in the family room, and the nurse was, I don't know, taking his temperature and his blood pressure or something. And we had a bell, like a big old school bell, so that if he wanted anything, you could hear this all over the house, because he had a nasogastric tube, and we weren't sure that he'd be able to yell loud enough, etc., etc. We had shifts. My girls blissfully allowed me to try to sleep through the night, and then they would, and I would do the day shift, and they would take the night shift. But nobody ever really kind of fell totally asleep. And this bell goes off. It's going like crazy. And kids get up and tear downstairs in their bra and panties, and I'm running from the kitchen, and Robert's in the family room, and the VON is standing there, and he said, see, it works. She had said to him, you know, are you sure that you can get help, that, you know, the bell is adequate enough if nobody's around, kind of thing? And Robert said, oh, well, I'll show you. You know, didn't care that other people were sleeping or anything else. And, you know, and the kids there in their underwear, and I'm dashing in, and we're just like pale, and what in the hell's happened? He said, see, it works. So, you know, on the one hand, you want to say, don't try that again. And on the other, you think, you know, the humor just never ends, sort of thing. And the nurse was mortified. I mean, she knew that the girls had woken up, and, you know, and we all panicked and thought something, that, you know, he must have lost consciousness or something. So, anyway, humor, it can, if you will let it, you will find it in the most chaotic and most tragic of situations. And it is helpful, and for us it helps make a lot of things bearable. Robert's surgeon said something when we went back for the post-operative visit. He said to Robert, he said, you know, you have an amazing attitude, and that's going to take you a long way in your process with this disease. And he said, and your second greatest asset is your wife. She's got a lot of strength and a lot of skill, and she's going to get you through a lot. And that empowered me like I didn't expect. I thought, okay, he's thinking I'm got some skills here somewhere. I guess I better dig deep and find them. And, you know, as much as you don't want to have that conversation, you don't want to hear it, I think it really, I don't know, it's sort of, it did a lot to make me think there is a lot I can do, and there is a lot I should do, and there is a difference I can make, and I'm going to do it. You know, can't change the outcome, but I can do that. So going back to the farewell tour, we decided to do some things that we'd done before, and the first one was to go in June to Montebello in Quebec. And it's a hotel, but it's made all of wooden logs, which is why Robert loved it, because he was passionate about wood. And we went with a couple, and we went and played golf, and I thought, oh, I can't do this. How can I go back to somewhere that's given us so many happy memories? I'm just going to be a wreck. I'm going to cry. I can't do this. This is just emotionally challenging. You know, no, I can't go. And then, you know, I thought, okay, what's my mission? My mission is to make sure that Robert has as much joy and as much fulfillment as he possibly can for as long as he can. So if that's my mission, that's what I'm going to stick to. So we eventually arrived from the plane and in a car and drove there and got there. And when he got out of the car, you know, he said, wow, isn't it great to be here? You know, it wasn't like, oh, this is going to be my last time here, and, you know, I'm just going to absorb this place because I'll never see it again, and I hope you'll come back on your own, Debbie. Something. None of that. He was just, wow, isn't it great to be here? The place hasn't changed a bit. Isn't it wonderful? You know, and so all of my worries about how emotional it was going to be and how I was going to handle it and all that kind of stuff, they just kind of evaporated. So it came down to Robert's attitude and his handling of the situation that made it a lot easier for us as a family. But it also set an expectation for us, I think, that we wanted to meet his level of the way he was going to meet it. And I'm sure, I know we didn't always feel like that inside, but we did. We loved PEI, and our younger daughter was at a horse competition over there, and she was debating taking a job in PEI, and she wanted her dad to go over and see where she'd be working and what she'd be doing and that kind of thing. So we went over, and we drove off the bridge, and we were driving down the highway towards Charlottetown, and we passed a bulletin board that had to have been as big from that window to that wall, the end of the wall there. It was stark white. It had nothing on it. It didn't say brought to you by the Church of Latter-day Saints or the United Church or anything like that. It just said, in great big letters, don't count the days, rather make each day count. So several kilometers went by. We hadn't said anything. And I said to Robert, did you see that sign? And, yeah. Did you see it? Yeah. That's my mantra. That's what I'm trying to say. That's my mantra. That's what I'm going to make it. And so a few more kilometers went away, and I said, do you think we should drive back and see if it's really there? You know, I mean, it was just like it loomed up like a mirage, and it didn't have anything else on it. And Robert thought about it and he said, nah, best not to. So whether it was really there, you know, we both saw it, it must have been there. But I've been back to several times to PEI since then. And my daughter did go and take a job there, and I never saw the sign again. So that's what it is. So when we were on this trip to PEI, we were again, friends went over with us, and we played some golf, and we spent some time with Ainsley and visited the horses and all that kind of stuff. And we went to see the show, The Buddy Holly Story, which if any of you ever get a chance to see it, is absolutely fantastic. You cannot sit still. You're up bopping the whole time. And in The Buddy Holly Story, which I had seen, that was my second time seeing it, and Robert had seen it 3 times, once in London with a buddy of his when they were on their way to Hungary to hunt. And then he and I saw it in New York, and then PEI was the 3rd time for him. The previous 2 times, this show is like a concert within a concert. And so at the end of the show, you know, Buddy Holly gives his last concert before he gets on a plane and is killed in a plane crash tragically at a very young age. And so it's kind of like the concert's going on, and in the middle of it, they have a lucky draw. So usually there's a sticker on the bottom of your seat or on your program or something, and they say, whoever has the sticker, you know, come on up and get a prize. So in London, Robert was that person. In New York, Robert was that person. So we're sitting there with our friends, and Tony says, I'm just going to die if that bugger is the prize again tonight. Surely not. I said, no, don't worry about it. Anyway, halfway through the concert, within the concert, music's going, and the guy says, is there a Bob Matheson in the house? And Tony said, oh my God, I cannot believe it. So anyway, they come down to him and they give him a prize, and they interview him and they ask him, you know, questions and stuff like that. So it turns out that the lady that my daughter was going to work for was on the board of the Confederation Center, and she had called them and said, would you make sure that Bob Matheson gets the prize tonight? Because you're not supposed to know who the person is. And I didn't twig when it said, is there a Bob Matheson in the house? It should just be everybody check their seat, and whoever it is puts up your hand. So Robert says, this dying's pretty good, isn't it? You know, you get stuff. You know, stuff happens to you. And it was just one of those things. As a generalization, he said whatever energy he had left, he was not going to expend in wallowing in self-pity and trying to figure out a way to try to beat a disease that probably wasn't beatable. So he's going to put all of his energy into being happy, feeling joy, having experiences, you know, spending family time and time with his friends. And he certainly did that. His birthday was August 28th. So that's coming up. So girls and I, well, what in the heck do you do? It's going to be his last birthday. What do you do? You know, I mean, do you ignore it and forget it's not his birthday? Do you, you know? And so we decided to have a big party, and we would ask all his closest friends and, you know, our relatives and that kind of thing. And it was, and Robert had said, people aren't to bring gifts. It's a waste of money to buy gifts for a dying man. You know, they've got better things to do with their money. Don't bring gifts. So we said that to everybody. It was a night like tonight. It was perfect. The moon was, oh my God, it was the size of this room. It was beautiful. There wasn't a ripple on the bay. Robert loved fireworks, and we decided that the family gift for him would be a fireworks show. He didn't know that. We didn't tell him. So people came, and we had a fabulous barbecue, and he was just in such high form, and he was telling stories, and we were laughing, and it was, you know, I just kept looking out and thinking, oh my God, this is just like, this is surreal. You know, it was just unbelievable. But for him, it was a connection and a time, not to say goodbye, but one more time to have a fabulous encounter with all of his friends and family. And for them, it was a memory that they'll never forget. You know, it was just amazing. So we took him down to the wharf, and we had set up the fireworks parade, and the fireworks show went on, and he was just, this just can't be better. A person should die every year. You know, if you get a birthday like this, how come you never did this before? You're only doing it when I'm dying, you know? And it was wonderful. And then one of the guests at the party, actually the woman who gave him the prize at the Confederation Center, dressed up as Marilyn Monroe. And she came down to the wharf with this big cake that I'd made. And she said, "Happy birthday, Mr. Matheson. Happy birthday, Mr. Matheson. Happy birthday, Mr. Matheson. Happy birthday." Like Marilyn Monroe, I can't do it like that. And everybody's going, "Where did you find her? How do you find people to rent like that? Did you hire her?" And I said, no. Because we didn't want to let the cat out of the bag. Anyway, when Robert realized who it was the family friend, he just thought that was, he just thought that was the cat's whiskers, you know. And so it was just like turning a day and a night that would have been so morbid and so upsetting for everybody into something that I have to tell you was joyous. And at the end, and I had put a lot of work into it. I'd done all the food myself, etc. And Robert came up after, he said, "Debbie, we've had a lot of wonderful times in our life, but thank you so much for that." He said, "I think that was one of the single best nights in my life. It was the right thing to do for us, and it was incredibly, incredibly wonderful." He played golf right up until November. It was one of those falls when you could. His very last game was almost the last day of November. It took a lot to get him there. I had to send him with snacks. I had to warn the people that he was playing with, because he would call me and say, "I feel faint." I said, "Because your blood sugar's low." "Oh, is that what it is?" "Yeah." "Eat something. Take out this snack that I've sent for you. Eat that drink." "Oh, okay." So, you know, like he didn't absorb any of that. He just didn't want to clutter his mind with that. That was my job. So, but as you probably know, having a low blood sugar thing is much more serious than having a high blood sugar incident. So, you know, I'd call all the people who's going to play with, say, "Okay, after 4 holes, make sure he eats this, and after 8 holes, make sure he eats that, and make sure he drinks this," and all that kind of stuff. Of course, they'd forget too. They're men, excuse me, but they didn't pay attention to all those details either. Or Robert would say, no, she's just fussing. She doesn't, you know, we don't. I don't need to do that, but he did. Anyway, and he had a bile duct bag hanging out, and I jury-rigged it with 2 undershirts and putting it between them, and pinning it in a number of ways so that he could swing golf, so, you know, it didn't swing in the breeze with him and stuff. It took a lot to get him out. And he came home that day, and he said, "That's the best scored I've ever scored in my life. It's the lowest golf score I've ever had. It's probably the last golf game I've ever going to play, and it was the lowest score." What do you think of that? You know, it wasn't like, "That's my last golf game I'm ever going to," you know, I mean, it was just, he was an amazing person. I think I've said before, but I think what I wrote down is, when you have a mission, you have a focus. And Robert's mission was to be as loving, as kind, and as create as many wonderful memories as he could for his family and friends. And our mission was to make sure that he was well enough and everything was in place so that he could do that. And he really did make his mission to try to prepare us for a future without him. I respect him so much for that. I know it must have been very hard for him. He never sort of let on that. But he came home one day and he said, I've been shopping for burial plots. So, I mean, what do you do? Do you collapse on the floor and start crying? Or do you say, "Oh no, oh my God, that's such a morbid and horrible thing"? And he said, "You know how hard it is to find a place in the city, to find somewhere where you'd like to be buried that's nice? You know, it's not easy." And he'd gone to Bedford because there's a little burial plot off of Wardour Avenue, and it's peaceful and it's quiet, and he thought he would love it there. So he went there, and they told him that you couldn't be buried there unless you were a resident of Bedford. Okay, so then he goes to his good friend who lives in Bedford, who had bought 6 burial plots, one for he and his wife and their 4 children. So he says to Tony, I want you to sell me 2 of your burial plots. And Tony said, sure, no problem. Everybody's getting cremated these days, and we won't need 6 anyhow. So Robert troops back to the people who run the cemetery. No, you're not allowed to buy and sell burial plots. So back to square one. So he comes home one day and he said, I think I found a place that'll be really good. It's in St. John's Cemetery, and it's quiet, and it's off on its own, and it's under a big tree, and it's near the little chapel, and I think it'll be a place that you'll be okay going to, and I'll be happy to see you come and see me. I said, okay. He said, I'm going to buy 4 plots. I said, why are you going to do that? Well, you and me and our 2 girls. I said, well, but they're not going to want to be buried with us. They're going to have their own families, and they'll be buried. Oh, you don't think they want to be buried with us? And well, maybe, but I don't think so. And I said, even if they do, now that everybody's getting cremated, you can pile a whole bunch of them into 2 graves. You don't need 4. And, oh, well, that makes sense. I'll go back and talk to them again. And I'm thinking, am I having this conversation? Are we having this conversation together? It's like, did you buy 5 pounds or 10 pounds of apples to make 4 apple pies? It was just that kind of conversation. And you think, oh my God. But it got us through. Now the irony is, he's still not there. He was cremated, and an extended family member had made him a beautiful wooden urn out of Indian rosewood, which we carried East Coast Specialty Hardwoods, and knew that he would love to be in. And after the service, he came home to our house. I said to the girls, we should bury him. No, we're not ready to bury him. Well, he lived at Sarah's house for a while, and then he lived at Ainsley's house for a while. And then they'd say, well, Mom, you should have him for a while. And I'd say, well, I actually don't fear your dad's there. I think we should bury him. Oh, no, we're not ready to bury him. Anyway, he is still traveling back and forth between the 2 houses, and the burial plots that Robert had bought are still unoccupied, and he's probably saying, I told those women that I wanted to be buried there, but that is not what happened. So, anyway, when the tumor really started to grow incredibly, he was fully impacted with his bowel. We, through advocacy, arranged to, and through his surgeon, not through the palliative care people who I feel let us down hugely, but through his surgeon, arranged to have a pain block, a nerve block, which even though he had to continue on the morphine and all that kind of stuff, helped with the pain a lot. This was just before Christmas, and so he had the nerve block, and you have to stay in the hospital for a day afterwards or 2 days afterwards because of complications that can set in and stuff like that. And he hated to be in there, and he asked a surgeon what was going on. His surgeon said, so he was fitted with a nasal gastric tube, and he was on a suction machine to suction out anything that he drank, and he couldn't eat it all. So this was fairly distressing to me. Although Robert just took it in his stride, he continued to try to live life across the hall rather than in his room, and he and Sarah would go outside at night and sit in the car, and then they'd go driving around the city, and they might go back to bed at 3 or 4 in the morning, and it wouldn't matter what you said to him, but he'd say, I'm dying, what are they going to say? What harm can I do to myself? Just I'm going to do what I want, when I want, sort of thing. So I don't know whether anybody else would ever do that, but that's what he did. And so he had a conversation with his doctor, and his doctor said, how am I going to get out of this? And his doctor said, well, he said, I want to go home. I desperately want to die at home. I want to be home in my own, with my family in my own space. And he said, well, if you continue like this, you'll be dead in probably 2 days. And if you take, in 3 days, and if you take the nasal gastric tube out, you'll probably be dead in 2. And Robert said, well, I'd like to drink. I'd like to be able to drink and have it suctioned up. And anyway, so between advocacy, it took a lot behind the scenes, but getting the palliative care people and the VON organized and learning ourselves all the things we were going to have to do. We were going to have to attend to oxygen, we were going to have to attend to the bile thing, we were going to have to attend to the nasal gastric tube, and and the butterflies and the pain medication and all the other medications that go along with it to keep a person comfortable. And it was Christmas time, so the VON couldn't come as often as they would like to. The palliative care regional supervisor never did come and visit. She would call and say, I hear you people are pretty good and you're strong and you know a lot, so we're short-staffed and it's Christmas time, and so is it okay if we don't come and have a visit? And you're thinking, well, I guess we'll figure it out somehow. So, and Robert would keep saying, don't worry about it, I'm dying, what could you possibly do to hurt me? You know, if you make a mistake, no big deal, you know, and I said, okay. I just don't want to end it any sooner than we need to, you know. So he was in the hospital with a nasogastric tube and finally had everything in place to come home. And I said, and they said, people don't go home with nasogastric tubes. And I said, well, this person does because he's dying and this is his wish, and so he's going to go home with one. And so I said, we need a suction machine, can I borrow that one? And they said, no. I said, well, if he's going to be in the hospital and he's going to use it, then nobody else is going to use it, so why can't we use it at my house and I'll bring it back to you? No. Could I rent it? No. Okay, I'll buy it from you. No. I thought, I was disgusted with them. I'm sure there's policy, but anyway. So we took him home. One of my neighbors who had been an administrator at the infirmary had said to me, if there's anything I could do, and people always say that, and there's practically nothing for them to do, so I said, well, what you could do is try to round up a suction machine for me. So she called everywhere in all her contacts, and she finally found someone at the IWK, and she went in, and the biomedical engineer and she took 3 very old suction machines and jury-rigged it and brought it home to my house, and it worked. So, you know, where there's a will, there's a way, and my mission, as I said, I was on a mission to make his life as fulfilling as possible for as long as possible, and I wasn't going to not have that happen if I had to. And I was on the phone, and like my time was being, what I resented was my time was taken up on the phone calling all these oxygen companies and these medical supply companies trying to rent or buy a machine when I should have been with Robert and somebody else should have been doing that. But that's the way it was. So anyway, he came home, Christmas tree wasn't up, and we always had a very large Christmas tree because we have an A-frame in the house, and it's always one of those things where it takes the whole family to put it up, and there's always a little argument around that, etc. And the louder I talked about how high the tree is, the higher the tree got. So after, you know, like 10 or 15 years, I realized that there was like an equation here. If I barked a lot, the tree got higher. So I started to just be very quiet. Anyway, everybody decided since this was Dad's last Christmas, this would be the year that it would be really, really big. And he said, so let's get this tree up and get Christmas underway. And you know, nothing like, I'm going to be dead in 2 days, and, you know, it was none of that. And then we didn't think he'd be here for Christmas, so then what do you buy a dying person for? Presents, you know, I mean, it was just bizarre. And people came, the house was just open all the time, and people came to visit some of his long-standing friends, and we had fabulous laughs and time. I mean, Robert would bring them up to date on what was happening. He'd be sitting there in his Johnny shirt and the nasogastric tube, and he'd be drinking like he'd drink whiskey. And then we'd just quietly go over, and by this time we'd learned how to hand suction, which was much quieter and calmer. We learned how to hand suction him and just quietly take it away. And he'd say, my God, the money I could have saved all these years if I'd known you could suction this stuff back out. And I said, yeah, but you wouldn't want to be drinking it back in. and you know, and he drank champagne and he drank wine. And he said, I could never mix my liquor before. But look now. You know, it was incredible. It was amazing. And Christmas Eve, we always had a big family with friends and family on Christmas Eve, and he said, I want you to have this dinner. I said, Robert, my heart's not in it. He said, well, you know, it would be great. And I said, okay, get you. So here I am, you know, preparing this huge meal and setting the table and all the decorations and everything else. And everybody came, and he sat at the table with his wine or whatever he was drinking, and he didn't eat what the rest of us ate. He wanted me to have all the regular foods that we had. And he told stories, and one of the stories that he told was how we met. So he had always told people, we'd been high school sweethearts, and he'd always told people that You know, I was in grade 10 and everybody was bugging me because I didn't have a girlfriend, and I went out in the street and I saw Debbie Wilbur and I thought, okay, she'll do. And so I asked her out, and because I was just too lazy to find anybody else, we just went together for 7 years and then we got married, you know? So anyway, so I'm going to tell you the truth about how I met your mother. And in 1964, I was working for my father over the Christmas holidays and days when students had jobs at Christmas time, and he worked for the CNR. And he always had to wait for the mail train to come in before he could leave work. And this particular night, the mail train was stopped by a huge snowstorm in New Brunswick, and it couldn't get through, so they got to leave work early. And so he said, I decided to call your mother and see if she wanted to get together. And he said, and that was the beginning of a wonderful love and a wonderful relationship and a wonderful marriage. And he said, just think, if there hadn't been a snowstorm on December 23rd, 1964, none of you would be here, and here we are tonight celebrating, you know. And so it took him 45 minutes to tell that story. But there wasn't a dry eye in the house, and, you know, it was amazing. So we met at Christmas in 1964. We became engaged at Christmas in 1970, and he was dying at Christmas in 2010. So Christmas seemed to have been a bit of a theme for Robert and I in our life. But he lived until January 1st. He had had no food. He received people. The house was full all the time. We laughed at and he didn't sleep. So it meant that whoever was on duty with him at night, whichever one of the girls, and sometimes they both stayed up together, they didn't sleep either, because Robert would say, you don't sleep when you're in the last few days on the planet. You know, you don't want to waste any of these minutes. You're not going to sleep. So we might doze in a chair or something, and the junior hockey was on, which was always a tradition with us, and we were watching that and watching our favorite movies and playing crib and, you know, all the things we did as a family at Christmas time. And I don't know how he had the strength and stamina to do that. So eventually one of the VO nurses was there one day, and she said, I don't know how he's still alive. She said, he's just exhausted, you know, he's trembling with kind of nervous energy. I think we should give him a bit of a sedative and see if he won't sleep for a few hours. Well, we gave him a very mild sedative. He slept for 18 hours. And we were thinking, oh my God, we didn't say our final goodbyes to him, this is going to be it, et cetera, et cetera. And then we would say, he's going to be so pissed off if he wakes up that we gave him that sedative and he slept for 18 hours. He's never going to forgive us. Let's hope he wakes up. So anyway, he woke up for a while, and then he just went back to sleep, and he died on January 1st. But before he went, there was a good friend there, and he was lying on the couch, and he just said, you know, I love you all, and it's been quite a ride, and you've been wonderful, and I'm okay. And he just, his last things was this, he just, bye-bye, and closed his eyes. Now, he didn't die, he just went back to sleep. And so we decided we'd read to him. Well, his favorite poet was Robert Service. So I go get the Robert Service book, and I start reading, and I realize, oh my God, this is about the cremation of Sam McGee. Trash that. And then the next one was Dan McGrew. What is it's called? Anyway, that's about death. Put that one aside. And then he loved the poem, oh, how could I forget it? Anyway, it was another poem that involved, the Highwayman. The Highwayman came charging through the night, and he eventually dies, of course. And I thought, oh my God, everything we're reading is about death. So we started to laugh and giggle because it was just so funny. It didn't matter what we picked up. It was like we couldn't get away from it, you know, sort of thing. So anyway, that's, I guess the last, I know I've gone on forever and ever and ever, I apologize, but the story seems to me not to have an end, and I keep remembering things. But I guess one of the things I wrote down here was, once you've accepted it, you can rearrange how you're going to live with it. and living with it, not despite it. That's the key thing. And I think that's what Robert did. He found a way to live with it. Nothing was left unsaid. The family created and took advantage of opportunities to say all those things that so often are left unsaid. I am so proud of Robert, and I'm so proud of my daughters, and I'm so proud of myself too. We did good. We united as a family as we never had before. It was immensely powerful for the journey we were on. We pulled together, making precious moments, sharing precious thoughts, and cherishing precious hugs. It was an incredibly sad time. I'm not going to say it wasn't hugely emotional, hugely tiring. I realized after Robert died how tired I was. It took me months to kind of find my equilibrium again. But it was incredibly inspirational. And since Robert has died, you know, I find it obviously very lonely, and learning to live by yourself is quite an adjustment. But I think if he could learn to live with his death, I can learn to live with my life. How much better is that? You know, I have to take my inspiration from what he gave me, and it was so powerful. And I think my children have been inspired by him. And so I guess the last thing I want to say is that one of the keys, I think, to how we got through it all was trying to always create a sense of normalcy. Now, the situation changed all the time, so you had to readapt. Your sense of normalcy had to adapt all the time. You were always readapting. But if you could achieve that sense of normalcy and that sense of nothing is a crisis, nothing is overwhelming, nothing is so hard that you can't face it, you can't figure it out. And so for us, I think trying to always achieve a sense of normalcy, even though there was a new normal often, that was really key for us. Rather than going from crisis to crisis to crisis and panicking and always reevaluating, it was like, okay, this is the normal now. This is what the steps are to keep it on an even keel. And then, 2 months later, okay, this is the normal now, So in tribute to Robert, I'd like to read the obituary that we wrote. And for this, I will need my glasses. And then I'll be quiet, and if you have any questions or comments, I'd be glad to entertain them. Robert Matheson, 63, head of St. Margaret's Bay, died at home January 1st, 2011 of pancreatic cancer. He was born in Halifax, August 28th, 1947, to G. Robert Matheson and Ada Blakey Matheson. He is survived by his wife of 39 years, Debbie Wilbur, daughters Sarah and Ainsley, both of Halifax, brother Bill Matheson of Pugwash, and extended family member Sean Chapman of Halifax. Robert was first and foremost a family man, his priority being to love and provide for his family, a responsibility he held close to his heart and fulfilled so well. He loved spending time at home on Schooner Cove with his family, his Labrador retrievers. He was rarely without a dog at his side, and his gardens. He amassed an expansive collection of rhododendrons, which gave him great joy every spring when they bloomed so profusely, and they are beautiful today. He loved the ocean and spending time on his boat exploring the islands and fishing on St. Margaret's Bay. He and his family shared so many unique outings with a close circle of family friends. He helped build memories that will last a lifetime, especially for the young family members. He cherished his close friendships, and he valued the many adventures and relationships they brought to his life. He loved to travel, enjoying fabulous trips with Debbie and his girls. He also traveled extensively with his friends, where they hunted birds, fished, and golfed all over the world. Robert was an exceedingly generous man. Where he saw a need, he filled it without fanfare, never seeking recognition for his many deeds of kindness. He was also very generous with his time, always willing to give sage advice and guidance. He had a wicked sense of humor, and he was renowned for the stories he told, many of which stretched on in a seemingly unending manner. Robert was the founder and president of East Coast Specialty Hardwoods Limited, his professional pride and great accomplishment. He truly loved his work, the people, and the old-fashioned values the lumber industry provides. Robert embraced his life post-diagnosis as he had the extraordinary ability to transcend the physical and emotional suffering and focus on the things that were truly meaningful to him. He felt that he had been given the gift of time, and he used it to go on his farewell tour. It was quite a ride. His mantra became, "Do not count the days, rather make each day count." This was a very rich time in his life, rich also for his family and friends who experienced it with him. A very special thank you for the compassionate and immediate efforts by Dr. Mark Walsh, Dr. Ian Beaupre, and Dr. Alwyn Jacquemart. The results of their work provided greater quality of life for Robert and allowed him and his family to experience the true magic of Christmas again. Pancreatic cancer is often asymptomatic, thus difficult to diagnose early and treat successfully. It is through research that early detection and treatment leading to better outcomes will be achieved. With this in mind, the family requests donations be made to the Craig's Cause Pancreatic Cancer, etc.